Hello and welcome. The goal of this podcast is to get listeners connected with others in the sports industry because they say it's all about who you know, and now you know us. Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Constant Sports Podcast. Today we have Thurman Foreman joining us today, and the title, I guess the premise of this podcast is protecting the brand, intellectual property, NIL, and athlete rights with Thurman. So thanks for joining us today, Thurman.
Of course, man. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, awesome. So for a little bit of background and overview from some of the work that Thurman's been involved in, before transitioning to law, Thurman performed clinical research at the National Institutes of Health at UT Southwestern. After leaving research, he joined the sports media company Rate My College Coaches as a sports journalist and is now their director of intellectual property. And additionally, he works for Generational Law Group, working as it's the intersection of sports, music, media, and IP. And he is the director, like I said, property at Rate My Coaches, former NCAA compliance law extern, done a lot of great work with athletes, musicians, and other creatives, helping build their trademarks, copyrights, and contracts. Anything I missed there, Thurman, before we go
Nah,
on?
you hit it on the head. That was great.
Perfect. I guess so. I guess just from the jump here, kind of interesting career arc, career journey. You went from clinical research to now IP, sports law, and the athletes' rights and things like that. So maybe give us a little bit of a kind of an overview of how you went from clinical research to now kind of the sports world.
Yeah, so when I was doing clinical research, I was working on stuff like the rabies virus, vaccines, epigenetics, a lot of cancer biology. So I was at UT Southwestern at the time, and I started doing sports journalism randomly. I
Mhm.
think I was on Twitter or something, and somebody was like looking for openings. So I DM like the owner or whatever. They ignored me. I'm like, all right, cool. So then I tried again. I had my little submissions. I'm like, cool, I'm off to the races here. So I'm at UC Southwestern, and it was kind of like a bad dream. It was like I was working there. And then at some point when I started doing the journalism, I was like, why do I not want to be here anymore? This doesn't make any
Not
sense. This is
feeling it,
like,
yeah.
yeah, it was a lot of sacrifice that went up to that point. So I just kept going down the rabbit hole. I was able to do a lot of good stuff, do interviews, write like when you go to the credentials, press credentials,
Yep, yep.
that was great. I used to train at Guy Mesger's gym actually in Dallas. So
Okay.
he was in like the pioneer generation of MMA.
Uh-huh.
He would always like tell us stories after training and stuff like that. Audrey Wolf used to run a lot of the classes, but I got to interview them. That was great. So I found my way to rate my college coaches and started focusing on college sports. And then I eventually, made the transition to school and really focusing on sports and entertainment.
I see. Okay. That I mean, I guess as you explain it more, it makes a little bit more sense. But from the jump, the going from A to B is quite the path. And then now
Yeah.
that you're kind of in the IP agent, sports musician and entertainment, what's really the role that plays in those various sectors?
So like what do we do for like clients, stuff like that?
Right, right, yeah.
How do you add value to them?
Mhm.
So, man, there's a lot of stuff. Well, I mean, with intellectual property, you really want to protect your interests and you want to monetize. But when you're working with professionals to protect your and register your intellectual property, you really want to avoid intellectual colonialism or piracy,
Mhm.
if you will. If you go down a lot of the history, a lot of opportunity, a lot of wealth was missed out on either for negligence because you just didn't want to protect it, or just flat out stealing. So you have the opportunity to prevent that now. So really, we're trying to help you get as much out of that as possible. And just help you understand like your brand can do so many things for you,
Mhm.
and be of a lot of value to you, but we also try to help you understand, don't get too focused on the dollar amount. I'm sure you'll
Right.
follow up with that, but
Uh-huh.
that's a,
Yeah, I guess we'll touch on that obviously, and then a little bit with I guess common mistakes as athletes and entertainers make. Obviously you're there to prevent those, but what are some common mistakes that athletes, entertainers, etc. make when they're attempting to protect their brand and kind of create their I guess company or brand, etc.
so I would say two things. First of all, it's the greed. Actually, I'll do that second. I'll do that second, I promise. Second is the greed, but the first thing is not being congruent with who you are.
Mm,
So and I really have to say this like as directly as I can. If you know you're the type of guy, you're wild, you like to, party at,
Mhm.
more adult-centered areas and stuff like that. If you know you like to, this, do that. I don't want to, get too graphic, but it's like, please don't get a partnership with Johnson Johnson
Yeah.
or, purport yourself to be like very like Christian,
Uh-huh.
forward and then we find you in like a brothel or something
Right.
like
Yeah.
you know what you're doing. Like, and the thing is, our society has come to the point where we accept a lot of different personalities as long as it's congruent with how you originally presented yourself. There's a lot
Mhm.
of people who had to fall from grace, in my opinion, undeservedly, because it's like, guys, they're trying, you
Right.
know. But you get a lot of that. Like, I can think of some athletes right now that are like very religious, but they get caught doing something. But it's like, guys, give them a little credit. Like, imagine how much further they would stray if they didn't have that
Yep.
foundation. You know what I mean? But I'm just saying for the public, they're gonna like lash out at you for it.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
you want to make sure you're get like if you're a wild boy, like do Monster or something like that. Like
Yeah.
don't get so like when you think of what your brand is, don't think first, what do I think it would be? What would make me the most amount of money? Think like if I got canceled, if something happened, if there was a scandal, what would stick? Like,
Yep.
who would stick by me 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Stuff like that. Like, really, like, if you like to joke around, if you want to do that, you need to do that. And you also need to tell your advocates, whether it's your lawyer, your agent, or whatever, that because then they can like work with that. And then they can basically make you bulletproof, for lack of a better term.
Mhm.
If you lie and you're just like, yeah, I'm Mr. Perfect, Miss
No,
Perfect,
not good.
whatever. Now they set you up. You're at Johnson and Johnson or whatever buttoned up thing. And now you get exposed and you look like a fool, not
Yep.
them, you know. So the other thing is the greed. So when you're putting a deal together, like let's say you want to, if you're doing like film production stuff like that, you want to do some like naming rights, credit rights, whatever it is, or you're trying to split the fees. It's fine. If you have not like really penetrated a market yet, don't get greedy. Don't try to like, take a eat the whole apple before you
Top
take the
dollar.
first
Yep.
bite. Don't be asking these people for it now. It depends on the situation, but
Mhm.
generally speaking, when you first get there, don't ask for a 50% split and you've never done any projects with anyone reputable. Like, come on, you know? But what you can do is alternatively, let's say, and this is all hypothetical, right?
Mhm.
Let's say
Sure.
you get 30, but your name has to be as big as theirs on
Okay.
like the first credit.
Mhm.
Or, your name has to be like the first, like, film by whatever. And another thing is like, again, let's say you don't get a dollar amount. Let's say, have you ever seen Suits?
Yeah.
So Suits just got a revamp. It actually is popular with two different generations now because they hit Netflix. And I
Right.
was watching the OG days, like
Yep.
back when Hulu first was online and everything. So imagine you had a deal with them, right? It was a small deal, but it's like a product placement. I have like the law school mentor is
Mhm.
real. But the law school mentor, we do like consulting for, networking or admissions and stuff like that. And Megan Sussex is studying for the LSAT. She fails the LSAT two times, whatever. She had some tutor, or maybe she didn't. And now she uses the law school mentor. She passes it the third time. Now, even let's say they didn't give you any money, them mentioning that is an ad. Every time they play that, every episode that's in, and potentially, you're in that decade, so the 2012, 2011 when it was originally on, and now you've gone all the way into the 2020s, you know, and you basically have a free ad on one of the most popular, TV shows with one of the most popular people in the world, or at least most famous.
Yeah.
That's tied to her name forever. But if you whiff on that deal, $1 million, you might miss out on that.
Yeah.
So just listen to reason.
I like that. Great example. And I think it's kind of being creative too and thinking, I guess, out in the future, not just, what's going to affect me right now, but kind of the long-term plan, the long-term structure, and, truly long-term play. So yeah, I like that a lot. And then speaking of kind of I guess we're diving to the athlete, it's kind of the NIL world a little bit with the NIL landscape and athletes kind of building their own brands and the different NIL laws, and they're evolving. And I guess what should athletes specifically in college, what should they know? What should they have in mind at the forefront as, maybe high school to now going into college?
What would be some of like, you mean like contract terms? Do you mean like making
Ye-
themselves valuable?
Yeah, so I guess it would be a two part. So I guess the first part is kind of different, I guess, laws or legalities of it, NIL, kind of how does it work, and then also
Oh,
protecting themselves and building a brand going forward.
yeah. So as far as the landscape, the first thing you need to learn is there's no such thing as an NIL expert right now.
Mhm.
Maybe 10 years from now, maybe 5 years from now when things start to settle down. But if somebody tells you like I got this sewed up, please. Um because the laws are different everywhere. So the biggest thing you can do is one, know that, two, hire a lawyer, and three, if you have some sort of like manager or a trainer, if you can get two in one, that would be
Mhm.
a really good move for you. But as far as the laws themselves, it's a mess right now. So there's a big hearing, right, with the House settlement coming up on April 7th. So watch that so you can be informed. There's, other hearings you can get online, but the laws are kind of changing every quarter. So it's hard to keep up with. So maybe you could follow along the laws in your state, but just be aware of that. There's a lot of moving parts.
Yep.
And that's why these professionals are so important.
Right. Well, and it's state by state, obviously. So that's that gets dicier, day by, I guess, more if you, especially with the transfer portal, right? You could be in Texas going to one school and you transfer, and now you're in whatever it is, Pennsylvania, going to Penn State, you're at another state, and it's all
Right.
a little convoluted there. But I'm sure they'll, figure it out sooner rather than later, and especially with the revenue sharing potentially coming down the pipe. That'll be interesting to see where that lands up.
Yeah, 20
So
million on the line,
yeah.
potentially, permissively. They don't have to give it to you.
Yeah, no, that'll be something. Well, and then that kind of goes into kind of the structure of NIL deals. And I guess what are your thoughts on, I guess we talked about it a little bit, but long-term plays and things like that. How have you seen kind of some of these athlete NIL deals being structured?
Um, I can't comment in too much detail, but
Hypothetically, of course.
yeah, let's just say there's a lot of different ideas, right? It also depends on you. It depends on your sport. It depends in what way you're marketable. But I would say one thing you can watch out for, and maybe this is what you're getting at. If you have a deal and they have X percentage of your NIL for more than like 5 years,
Mhm.
you need to talk to someone to help you do that deal. Because there's a number of people, I don't want to just, list them right now,
Mhm.
but they signed the deal, whether it was high school or college, and now they're getting all the way to the pros. And now these guys are still making money off you in the pros. And it's like, was it fair? That's really for the courts to decide. A lot of courts are in favor of the athlete, but that's not a guarantee.
Mhm.
So be wary of that.
Well, and that's kind of I guess, the university compliance versus like the athlete's rights, and where does that, line up? And especially with some of these jersey sales, I would think kind of when that's coming in, like if the school is selling, Thurman's number 22 jersey and they got that in the bookstore, I'm assuming they're gonna have to negotiate that, right? Is that kind of how
Yes.
that works?
Yeah, so you could have stuff like that. You could have like Instagram, for instance, like
Mhm.
X amount of money per post. You can have like, somebody just using your name in a for an advertisement, or just using your face, or both. Maybe you want to sell it together, maybe you want to do it, separately. You can have stuff like that. If you're like a Johnny Manziel, for instance, right? You're gonna have a lot of structure. And to speak on the structure more, let's say something's trademarked, right? I don't even know,
Mhm.
Menzel Mania or something. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
real. But back in the day when he was building that house at A&M,
Mhm.
right? A state trademark might not be the worst thing for you, especially if you have that market pretty much cornered. Like whether you were going to the league or whether you knew you couldn't play in the league. I'm not saying anyone knew. I'm just saying hypothetically, let's say
Yep.
you really not cut out for that. That doesn't really matter if I can just have Texas on, like, you're still a millionaire, man.
Yeah.
Um, and you can still really navigate that and have, whether it's like, hats in stores, or there're just so many things, blankets,
Hmm.
uh, purses, I don't know. There's a lot that you can do there, especially with social media.
Right. Well, and that's like the whole licensing deal thing really just opens up a whole can of worms with, what do you want to license? How do you want to license it long term, right? 5 year, 10 year, et cetera. And it'll, especially as this continues to roll out in college. And really, I mean, we've always known college sports has been big business, obviously, billions, millions and billions of dollars. And now it'll be kind of interesting to see where it shakes out. And especially with the kind of some of the mid-level smaller schools, if they're going to be able to kind of stay in those Division 1 levels with the, athletes going to different schools and then the revenue sharing, if that kind of goes through and how that goes through. But talk to us a little bit. You're mentioning a little bit, but kind of the impact of social media as far as the management and brain protection with, I guess, musicians too. We've been talking a lot about kind of athletes, but is it different with musicians and athletes, or is it pretty much the same?
In terms of like how they can like make money
Right.
and
Yeah. Just
that.
like yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty similar. Again, I cannot stress enough the congruency. Like, if you put up a facade on social media, you better make sure that you are able to keep that up 24/7. People are always recording you randomly. You never know what these people will do. Some of them just weird. They follow you around. But yeah, I mean, you got to think of almost every big transition as like, think of it as a music release, right? Whether
Mhm.
you're an athlete, whether, whatever, if you're playing in a tournament right now, right? March Madness, that's a boost.
Mhm.
So you want to, kind of market your posts as you can, whether it's a dance or, whatever it is. If you're a musician, you're going to be, dropping like an album or something like that. Like, hey, here's a little snippet. You're an athlete. Hey, a snippet will be your training highlights. So
Mhm.
let's say, and this is actually great, especially if you sucked at something, like if you can't dribble and you're just like every month just showing your progress, going through the cones or whatever, stuff like that. You take advantage of that. You take
Yep.
advantage of trends, and it's really, really, really valuable for you. And it's a great way to build your platform. And if you're one of those people, and there's a lot of college players, I'm sure you'll like this, but there's a lot of college players that are clearly not moving on.
Mhm.
They're clearly, college. Maybe they were only good because they like hit puberty early. That doesn't matter. You're still a content creator, and you can basically ride that off as long as you play your cards right,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You don't
No
have to
doubt.
be a stellar talent. You can make you money forever.
Mm. Well, and we've seen a lot of that, especially with kind of the lower, I guess, level Division 2, Division 3, even FCS, athletes where they're probably not making these top dollar figures that, the D1 school athletes are, but they're still, good content creators. They're kind of the day in the life things, showing the different skills they're learning and getting better at. And I feel like a lot of those creators are really seeing it pop off. And then, they create a YouTube channel or whatever it is, and the rest is history. Is I guess speaking of that a little bit, have you worked a lot of kind of with like YouTube creators? Kind of
I work
random,
with
but
I work with creators, yeah. In what capacity? What do you want to
well,
ask
I
me?
was just curious because it just kind of just came to me, but I read Peyton Manning, Omaha Productions, like invested a
Yeah.
bunch of money into good golf or good golf, and I was just curious what your thoughts are on kind of the YouTube creator market. Is it on the rise? Is it on the downhill? What do you think about that?
So it depends on what your content is. So if
Mhm.
it's family friendly or for kids, now we can have a separate conversation about whether you want kids chronically on the internet. But I'm just saying, if it's family friendly, like yeah, YouTube's your bread and butter,
Mhm.
TikTok, stuff like that. Um, you can capitalize a lot, but you really want to focus. You have to understand the difference between the platforms. So
Mhm.
YouTube's gonna be long form content is gonna be best for you making money and retaining subscribers and stuff like that.
I see.
TikTok is gonna be more like short form for obvious reasons. And then still need to be good at the short form stuff, but it just depends what it is that you're offering there.
I got you.
And what your creator is kind of like capable of. If they're great with the 3 minute, 1 minute videos, but they can't really talk for that long, like don't have them do a YouTube podcast, man.
Yeah, keep it
Like
moving.
no,
Yeah,
but if you're one of those people that's long-winded but charismatic, but they need more than a
it's
minute to
probably
make
for
a
you.
point, yeah, keep them on YouTube.
Makes sense. And then is I guess kind of putting a ball on that a little bit, but going forward is um, just maybe think about different cases or projects that you've worked on. Is there one that stands out that you've, I guess that you can talk about? Obviously, not the Pandora's
Yeah,
box, but
nothing special that I can really comment on, but I would say just notable IP cases and stuff in general. There's like the Ed Sheeran, copyright scandal, the Robin Thicke, and more bringing it back to sports, the UFC antitrust. So they
oh
just
yeah,
had that
that just
settlement,
came down.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they had that settlement, and if I'm not mistaken, there's one more in the pipe.
Okay.
And what this really comes down to for me, and I think there are probably more issues that the fighters have complaints about. But for me personally, in that market, it's the NIL
Hmm.
that's the most important thing. And it's allowing these fighters to make as much money off of their NIL as possible, and it's being restricted right now in various ways. But to the UFC's credit, some of the ways that it's restricted so that the UFC is like doing their marketing for their fighters in-house
Hmm.
and trying to guarantee their money
Right.
so that maybe some people are making 300,000 and your money got knocked down to 120, but some other fighters either couldn't make anything or were making like five and now they get bumped up to like 15.
Hmm.
So a lot of that stuff is a lesser, of two evils, but I would look to that. I think that's the most important thing. Like, can people use my name? Can people use my image? And there's a lot of restrictions on that, and there's a lot of parallels between the NCAA and the UFC. The UFC is the promotion. MMA
Right.
is the sport. I always like to make
Right.
that distinction,
Yep.
but I would say, yeah, I think that's the most interesting for me personally. There's just a lot of moving parts. There's no way I can like really put in the short version. Um, but just to give you an example, like a big thing in one of the suits was basically like, okay, you used our name or image in a video game and you didn't pay us.
Mhm.
But that kind of messed with some part of the settlement. I think it was their class certification. Basically, the judge was like, well, some of you got paid something, so you don't even really belong in this class. And it
I
kind of like
see.
it kind
Convoluted
of
already. Yeah.
messed their, yeah, because the whole time is like we're in this court so that we can give you, I guess you could say make it right in a vague sense,
Hmm.
but that really interfered with it. So just to give you an example of like what people are fighting for, why these antitrust things keep being filed, this is a lot more about NIL than a lot of people think.
I got you. Well, and from like my brief, I guess, understanding kind of the lawsuit with the UFC is, like you said, the UFC was basically like, here, we'll just market it for you. Don't worry about it. And then a
Yeah,
lot of the athletes, like that were, I guess, kind of took it upon themselves, like, no, I want my brand. I can market it better. Those are the guys that were kind of like, hey, I can do this better. And the athletes that, just put on the back burner. And so everyone was kind of like, well, then the UFC was like, well, we're marketing for you. You don't have to do it. That's kind of where I feel like it got confusing. That kind of that's about
yeah,
right.
yeah, because the UFC is essentially a media company, a marketing
Hmm.
company. Yes, they do sell fights, but the whole thing is the story.
The
The whole
promotion, the
thing.
build up.
Right. The punches and kicks aren't enough, as Chael Sonnen would say. I gotta meet that guy
Yeah,
soon,
for real.
him and Faber. But yeah, I mean, you're definitely on the right track with that. There definitely are a lot of personalities that get a little stifled, whether it's like the walkout music or
Hmm.
wanting to carry a flag out or something like that. Like you really gotta take the cuffs off these guys.
Hmm.
And they are pretty like free to do what they need. But yeah, it is just they need a little more.
Right.
I'm kind of getting something going with that, but separate conversation.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and it made me think, in the early days, they could have sponsors on their kits and on their flags and on their shorts, and then they were like, okay, put the pump the brakes on that one.
Yeah,
Clean
yeah.
the shorts.
That got a lot of backlash. So, just to go into that a little bit, so that was the canvas era, as they
Hmm.
say, right? And they were looking for sponsors. Fighters were looking for sponsors, and the more popular guys could have like one, like a George St. Pierre. He's a
Yep.
Canadian, national hero. He can just have Under Armour. He's paid. God knows how much they're giving him,
Yeah.
Or John Jones back in the day, he had
At
Nike
Nike.
for a
Yeah.
hot minute. I think he had Gatorade too at the same
Uh-huh.
time. But other people, it's like collage, if you will, of different sponsors.
Right.
Guys over, you want to have that logo on their
Yeah.
butt.
Come on, bring it over. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like a Habib, he's always on top of somebody. You get
Hmm.
that, boom, smack dab. So that all went away because the UFC did this deal with Reebok, and just from the outside looking in, essentially what they're trying to do is civilize the sport and clean it up.
Hmm.
because it's not savage, but a lot of people don't understand that. They still think
Right.
it's barbaric, this and that, but it's martial arts, right?
Hmm.
It's pugilism. It's one of the first, I think it might be the first Olympic sport, which is really called pancration.
Right.
But they're trying to get people to understand that. So best thing to do, get rid of reputable, clothing company. They got Reebok. Reebok got a lot of the names wrong. It was a
I
mess. And then they went to Venom. I think they're still with Venom right
think
now.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, but Venom was great because Venom had been working with them for a long time. So they had been working with like Jose Aldo, for instance, who was the champion right before
Hmm.
Conor McGregor. And they seem to be, very passionate and very competent, and very willing to make a difference there.
Yeah. No doubt. And then so that was a cool little rabbit hole we went down with UFC. Wasn't ready to do that, but that was awesome. I think that was a good
Anytime.
a good breakdown, and I'm a big UFC fan myself. So it was a fun little
Oh,
chat.
nice, nice, nice. Who's your favorite? I would say favorite two fighters right now. If you
Ooh.
had to put you on the spot.
Right now, so I'm a big Charles Oliveira fan. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I understand.
I like the way he's been fighting. I like Dustin Poirier. John Jones is up there. I mean, yeah. What about you?
Yeah, Shavkat Rakhmonov,
Okay,
Topuria, just
Yeah,
off the top of my head.
Poirier's a good
Nick
one.
Diaz, man. I was the
Okay, the
biggest Nick
OG.
Diaz fan.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe people only know Nate now.
right. Nick came
And that's
before,
actually
right?
beautiful.
Blaze a
Yeah, yeah.
trail.
Yeah, he was back in the Strike Force days and everything. I was a big Kevin Lee fan.
Okay.
Now people only know his brother, Keith Lee.
Yeah.
He's the guy that does the food reviews on TikTok.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, man, there's just like a lot of great talent coming up now. Obviously, yeah, huge John Jones fan, how could I leave that out?
Yeah, no doubt.
Um, yeah, a lot of these guys. I could just name like so many Tatiana Suarez,
Okay. Yep. Yep.
yeah, Valentina Shevchenko might
The
be my
bullet. What is
favorite.
she? The bullet? Is that what she's called?
Yeah, the
Nickname.
Bullet,
Yeah.
Joanna Jędrzejczyk, a big Ronda Rousey fan back in the day.
The
So
OG. Yeah.
yeah, they got a lot of people, and I love what they do with their women fighters, the way that they promote them.
Hmm.
In a lot of ways, despite a lot of the bad headlines, the UFC might be the most progressive sports league in the world,
Hmm.
if not the country. There is no WUFC.
Right. It's all
You
under
know,
one. Hmm.
yeah, if you can headline, you can headline. They push you. A lot of those fights are, a lot more entertaining than the men's for various reasons. But those girls crack, man, and
Oh
they're not
yeah.
scared, you know. They
Just
make
yeah,
it happen.
start swinging and I'm in. That's
Yeah.
let the bell ring and let's do it. So that's awesome. And then to kind of wrapping up a little bit, we touched on it, but top I guess advice for athletes, musicians, content creators, just to give them one piece of parting advice.
Um, hire a lawyer, get a man, especially if you're in college.
Hmm.
Hire a lawyer if you can afford it, an accountant too, and a manager. And if your manager can be like a trainer, also, that's fantastic because you want to be focused on what you're focused on, and you want a team that you can be honest with,
Yep.
that you can just go out and just dominate the market, and don't get too pressed on, oh, I'm not the best, or you don't need any of that. Okay. This is not that type of world. The best person doesn't always get the job, and there's no shame in it.
Yep.
Okay. If you're sitting on the bench with 1 million followers on TikTok or Instagram, you should thank God, okay, or whatever. It's a good thing. So do that. You need, whether it's like NIL negotiations, contract stuff, hit up Generational Law Group,
Shout out.
hit up there's a lot of people you can go to. You can go to follow SE Associates. If you look that up on Instagram, MV Projects, if you're making films, SE Associates is, management training and stuff like that. There's just a lot of people that you can contact. Please, your uncle, maybe he wants to do some stuff, but please make sure he really knows what he's doing. You can do Jones Legal Advisors if you're in Illinois. So that's what I would say. Build your team, stay focused, don't get discouraged. Be honest, be congruent with who you are. And then everything else will pretty much fall into place. It'll be a lot less stress for you.
Perfect. And then where can I guess athletes, others, people in the sports industry outside, obviously, where can they find you, websites, LinkedIn, etc.
So athletes, any athlete, whether you're coming from from high school or college, rate my college coaches. We want to tell your story, guys. We want to get to know you really on a human level as well as an athlete and get to know your experience at your school. It is really critical that people kind of know what environment they're going into. You can talk NIL, you can talk anything. Okay. So you can do rate my college coaches. That's number one. I was just on the Cold Hard Facts music podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at corporate Badi is Badi, or the Dog and Pony Show TV. Sometimes I'm on some podcasts there as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks, Thurman, for joining us today. I think we had a good chat. I enjoyed it a lot myself, and I know the listeners will too. And like I said, listeners and followers, make sure to go check them out at those outlined areas. We'll have those in the subheading too, and we'll be releasing this podcast on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, yeah, LinkedIn. We'll have some stuff, and then Twitter and Instagram as well. So thanks again for joining us, and thanks to all the listeners and viewers. And thanks again, Thurman.
Yeah, keep an ear out for Constant Sports.
There you
Always
go.
check in.
There
All
we
right.
go.